alphabet. Edward. It talks about blood though. It's the same. It's the same blood. You're on it. Stand with us and sing this morning. There's no words. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. Free from the passion and pride. There's power in the blood, power in the blood. When I cleansing to Calvary's side, there's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. Would you be white if it's whiter than snow? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. None that you lost in its life-giving flow. There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. Well, that was...
Good morning. We are glad to see you all this morning. Little hiccup there to start, but we're okay. We're all good. I'm so glad to see all of you this morning and welcome you to Bellrive. And so we'll take this time real quick just to, if we have any announcements. I do have a few things wanted to share with you. Ladies, it'll be in the bulletin coming up, but December the 9th, we are going to do a dinner for the ladies for Christmas. And so you don't have to bring anything as of yet. No, ladies for Christmas. And so I'm going to take care of the food, so you don't have to bring anything food-wise. As far as what we're going to do for entertainment, we'll update you on that. But December 9th at 6 o'clock, go ahead and get that on your calendar. And then next week is when we're gone. Next Sunday, okay? So Jody and I and Kevin and Ryan, we're taking Kevin and Ryan with us, and we will be gone. So Kaylee's going to take care of music, so we don't need to worry about that. But there will be no donuts next Sunday morning. And then the next week, well, for those of you that don't know, that aren't from Hamilton County, maybe, Food Park is no longer Food Park, and Little Giant Junior does not have donuts. So I'm in the midst of trying to fix that situation. So I don't know if I can, honestly. We threw something together for today, but I don't know if I can fix that situation. So while we work on that, we will not have anything next week, but then the next week I'll be back on for now. So, and then today, Aunt Mary brought just a few friends and family with her today. So welcome, Texas, to Illinois. We're glad to have you this morning. And so the reception for Aunt Mary and Uncle Si, they've been married for a few years, I believe 75. And so that is coming up in December, but we are celebrating today. So come and join us from 2 to 4 and celebrate them. I know they'll be glad to see you all. I think Connie said Uncle Si might tell a story or two if you stay long enough. So come and join us and celebrate them. So then very quickly, you will see today's Christmas kickoff. So you'll see the baskets. For those of you that are new, there is a list in there. If you take a basket, I'll be up here. We'll talk about that at the end. But if you take a basket, there's a list for 21 days to put some things in that basket and bring back. And then we will distribute those to those that need them in the community in December. There's that. And then it's also time to shop for the kids from OBR and Dahlgren. So I've got those lists. So lots going on today after church. We'll have a time to bless the baskets before we send them out, and then we will take care of getting all that distributed out. So anybody else have anything they need to share before we... Oh, Joanne, we're glad to see you back in church today. And then Vivian, I know you want to mention on Friday. Okay, so George that we've prayed for has been here, and you had just said he was getting ready to have another surgery, I believe, so they found him on Friday, so he has passed away, so remember friends and family. And there's no arrangements as of yet, Vivian? I don't. Okay. Okay, so we don't know any arrangements or anything as of yet, so. Okay. It was very nice, very nice. So it was good to celebrate Vivian and her 93 years. So, and we had a good crowd. There was a lot of ladies. Yes. Okay. Anybody else have anything before we move on? Oh, okay. Okay. Christmas card lists are in the foyer. So for those of you that are new, that is everybody that comes. We're on the Christmas card list, and you can fill out your cards, bring them. The mailboxes, I'm assuming, will still be back here. Kay, you're going to leave them there. Mailboxes are back here through this door, and you can leave them in the basket, and then the Postal Service, a.k.a. Kay and Dave, take care of that. It's much faster than the regular Postal Service. So it doesn't cost a thing, so it saves you on postage, and you can do your cards that way for here at church. So don't put cards in here for people that don't come to church here. Then they really do have to go to the Postal Service. So, okay. Anybody else before we move on? Okay. Hutch, you want to lead us in a word of prayer? What do you have up next back there? We need Yes, I Will. God
sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Yes, I will for all my days. Yes, I will. I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names. Nothing can stand against. I choose to praise, waked and in a grave I was called by name, born and raised back to life again. I was made for more. So why would I make a bed in my shame when a fountain of grace is running my way? I know I am yours. I was made for more.
All right, real quick before our last song, I'm assuming y'all know what is this week. It's Thanksgiving. So I am praying that you all are able to spend that time with family, friends, with eating. I mean, that's what we do at Thanksgiving, as long as we eat. And so I just want 3 people real quick to tell me something you're thankful for. Real quick. Your family. God's love, said Vivian. Okay. Family and friends at this church. So, amen. All right. That was 3. Anybody got something they really need to say? Well, you stole my thankful thing there, Janabeth. But I was going to say, like the example they've set for our family for the last 75 years, there's no way to say how much I appreciate what they've meant in my life is way beyond what I could ever say. Yes. Yes. And that they're here today. We had a little talk about that. They're going to be worn completely out by the time they get through today. But I knew when Connie said that Aunt Mary was coming to church. But, you know, and just that testament that they give to us as a family, as a church family, but have always meant the world to me. And I am her favorite niece, and she'll tell you that. So.
I've got something.
Okay, go ahead, Ed.
A lot of you people, when I was wet behind the ears and trying to learn how to be a Christian, those 2 sitting back there, they were my mentors.
Yeah.
I just want, and I appreciate that.
Amen. All right. Anybody else before we go on? All right. Go ahead and get us started.
To look upon we shout the hymn of heaven with angels and the saints. We raise a mighty roar, glory to our God, who gave us life beyond the grave. Holy, holy is the Lord. Holy, holy is the Lord. Holy, holy is the Lord.
In the beginning, God. If you can believe these 4 words, you can believe the rest of the Bible.
I have fallen in love with the work of Paul as I've studied the book of 1 Corinthians, and I believe you will too.
This is where Jesus taught in Capernaum, and you have to understand this scene.
In the book of Romans, Paul lays out a logical case for why the gospel is the answer to humanity's problems.
Right Now Media. It's for groups. It's for personal devotion. It's for parents.
The bullseye of parenting is to raise children who become like Jesus.
It's for kids.
This is Phil. We're digging into the Bible, which, as we've mentioned, is more than just a book.
It's for tough times.
So when you recognize that you're trying to have a conversation with your spouse and they're not ready to talk, it's not helpful to keep pressing them.
It's for every phase of life.
The prodigal son story is my favorite story because God fixes a problem with a party.
And now, it's yours. We've purchased a Right Now Media subscription for everyone in our church. So check your inbox for the digital invitation and download the app for instant access to thousands of biblically based videos. Get equipped. Get inspired.
All right, good morning, Belle Rive Church, Missionary Baptist Church. Good morning. We had that discussion in Sunday school. I want to nail it. And all of our visitors. I tried to get in quick enough today from Sunday school to shake hands, let everybody know we're happy that they're here, but I'll say discussion went on. It was a good time, but I didn't quite get in here in time. But we're very happy for everybody to be here. Very happy for lots of children. No, it is awesome. So, my first Sunday as pastor here. So, yeah, thanks, Lexi. Lexi applauded. I appreciate it. But it comes with, this week was a lot of emotions and thoughts on that for me. And the first being like, a kid on Christmas. Like, I'm just excited to be here, thinking about, you know, where to start, what to share, praying that, you know, God's behind it and leads and guides and directs me. And then just one thing you'll learn about me the longer that I'm here is that I'm also an open book, and I want to be 100% transparent. And there was also just a time of fear for me this week, and a time that I'm thinking, like, God, I'm praying that you are behind this, that this wasn't a me thing, and God, that I am who they need to be, and God, I just want you to use me, and just hoping and praying that in this time that I'm going to be enough. And I think that's something that in all of our lives at different times that we struggle with, that thought, are we going to be enough for what God has called us to be? I will say on a positive note, it was more of the kid on Christmas. I was excited to be here. This has been prayed over on both our behalves without knowing names for years now. In my life, Rachel and I have been married going on 3 years, and it was when we were dating that I was telling her that I felt God was pulling me in this direction from youth ministry and stepping out of my comfort zone, because teenagers are easy. They don't really know if I'm good or bad. They know if I brought pizza, if the game was fun, and that was comfortable for me. But I felt like God was calling me out of that, and so we began praying years ago when Jeremy ended his time with you here and moved on to what God had next for him. You began praying. And so this time has been prayed over, and I'm putting my faith in that God has brought all of us here, that our paths have been by his divine appointment, and I'm thankful for that. Some things in preparation for this that you may not know, probably only my wife would know, is that multiple evenings since that business meeting where we made the official decision, I've came here always under the idea of I'm putting more books in my office, but really there was something about being here and praying here. And I've been in this room when nobody else was here, and I've prayed over you, and I've prayed over this church, and I've prayed for God's vision and just that he would share it with me and show me what way he wanted us to go. And what I want to share with you today is that I believe that he does have a vision. And I'm not saying that isn't a speculation. I want to put emphasis on belief. I believe wholeheartedly that God has a vision for this church. I believe that in a time when we see churches all over rural America shutting their doors, I believe God has a vision for us. I do believe that vision includes that this church will grow, not only numerically and bodies in the seats, but those of us that are here are going to become more equipped and more on fire to leave the building and to share that gospel with our neighbors, with our co-workers, with our families, with all of those that God puts into our path. I believe that specifically because it's happened before. One of the coolest things ever since it's crazy, we live in the era of social media, and I put something out there and it reaches people all over. And when I started sharing and talking about Bell Rive and coming here, how many people reached out to me that I've known my whole life and never knew that they had ties here, and have reached out and are, I guess I'm not using his name, but you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure it out. Hamilton County's coroner messaged me and said it was at a revival in this church when he first gave his life to Christ. And men have messaged me and said, this is where God called me into ministry. There's a whole section of people here that can talk about how that calling has affected them and their family. And it's been numerous conversations like that. Pastors have reached out to me to share with me resources and books, and to tell me again about how this church has impacted their ministry that they've spread all over. And so I'm thankful just to be a part of that. But again, it reminded me that God's done it before, that God is present now, and that same God that has moved in this church for decades upon decades is still the same God we're serving today. I also want to give a little backstory to the next thing that I'm going to say, is because there is a lot of celebration for Mary and Silas going on today, and it is an amazing testimony that you guys share. But I want to give myself an out here. I wrote this and started on this idea before I knew about their celebration today. So I'm just going to take it as confirmation. But I'm going to use you as an example today, Brother Silas. You're going to, Brother Si, pick on you just a little bit. I did some research. I reached out to some of your family that are good friends of mine, and they told me that you were born in 1933. Okay, you guys go tell Jordan Hampson that he got that birthday wrong. I want you to let him know. Now, it's not polite to talk about a woman's age, so we're going to focus on Si. Also, when it comes to men, we tend to kind of wear our age like a badge of honor. We're just like, whoa, we survived that. We know what decisions we made, and we're like, we made it to this point. And so we're often more proud of that. But I bring up this fact because I can only assume, now you're going to have to correct my math, so is it 93 years of life then? 93 years of life. I can only assume that in 93 years, Si has seen a thing or two. There's some experience there. I just went back and took through your life and took some major moments from our history. That would have been the middle of the Great Depression. 1939 to 1945 was World War II. In fact, since World War II, we've seen 6 major military conflicts and wars, not counting all of the minor ones. In that lifetime, you've seen the civil rights movement. You've seen the era of hippies. You've seen the rise and fall of disco and big hair bands. I'm glad I wasn't there for that part. We've seen multiple political and religious assassinations, movements, beginnings and ends. Things have come and gone in that time. And I can stop there because I think I've said enough to make the point that in his lifetime, he's seen a lot of lows. A lot of those points that I mentioned there were lows. But of course, there's been highs as well. In your personal life, what we're celebrating this afternoon is that you've served God faithfully. You've loved your wife faithfully. I'm a lifelong Hamilton County resident, and I know for a fact I cannot attend a Hamilton County basketball game without sitting in a section that is accompanied by at least 2 people that are a product of this couple. If there was a quota for Hampsons in that gym, it would be met and surpassed every single basketball game. But whether good or bad, I'm going to speak for you, Brother Si, and you can attest to this if it's correct. You've always made it through it. Our nation has always made it through it. This church has always made it through it. And in all things, God had a plan. This is where I want to go into our scriptures today. If you would, guys, we're going to be reading Joshua chapter 6, verses 1 through 20. I'll say this a lot. I know that my job is to preach, but sometimes I feel like I'm just adding fluff to a word that's already there. When we read this, it's going to speak, and sometimes I feel like I don't even know what I'm being paid for, but I'm going to read this and we're going to discuss it. So Joshua chapter 6, verses 1 through 20 says, "Now Jericho was shut up inside and outside because of the people of Israel. None went out and none came in, and the Lord said to Joshua, 'See, I have given Jericho into your hand. With its king and mighty men of valor, you shall march around the city, all the men of war going around the city once. Thus shall you do for 6 days. 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. On the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow their trumpets. And when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, then all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat. And the people shall go up, everyone straight before him.' So Joshua the son of Nun called the priests and said to them, 'Take up the ark of the covenant, and let the 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord.' And he said to the people, 'Go forward, march around the city, and let the armed men pass on before the ark of the Lord.' And just as Joshua had commanded the people, the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horn before the Lord went forward, blowing the trumpets with the ark of the covenant of the Lord following them. The armed men were walking before the priests who were blowing the trumpets, and the rear guard was walking after the ark, while the trumpets blew continually. But Joshua commanded the people, "You shall not shout or make your voice heard, neither shall any word go out of your mouth until the day I tell you to shout, and then you shall shout." So he caused the ark of the Lord to circle the city, going about at once, and they came into the camp and spent the night in the camp. Excuse me. Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark, and the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of the ram's horns before the ark of the Lord walked on. And they blew the trumpets continually, and the armed men were walking before them, and the rear guard was walking after the ark of the Lord, while the trumpets blew continually. And the second day they marched around the city and returned into the camp, so they did it for 6 days. They were consistent and consistent and consistent with what God had told them to do. On the 7th day, they rose early at the dawn of day and marched around the city in the same manner 7 times. It was only on that day that they marched around the city 7 times. And at the 7th time, when the priests had blown the trumpets, Joshua said to the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. And the city and all that within it shall be devoted to the Lord for destruction. Only Rahab the prostitute and all those who are with her in her house shall live, because she hid the messengers whom we sent. But you keep yourselves from the things devoted to destruction, lest when you have devoted them, you take any of the devoted things and make the camp of Israel a thing for destruction and bring trouble upon it. But all silver and gold and every vessel of bronze and iron are holy to the Lord. They shall go into the treasury of the Lord." So the people shouted, the trumpets were blown, and as soon as the people heard the sound of the trumpet, the people shouted a great shout. And the wall fell down flat, so the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they captured the city. To give a little bit of backstory here, these are the Israelites now being led by Joshua. Moses is gone, but just like we talked about Brother Sai earlier, these people had seen a thing or two. In their time being faithful to the Lord and following, they'd seen highs and they had seen lows. These are descendants of the same Israelites that were enslaved in Egypt and had been freed. These are the same descendants and the last generations of the Israelites that had been in the wilderness, that had traveled and had seen manna be produced for them. Every provision had been met. They had traveled exactly the way God had sent them, and every time what God had promised had come to fruition. But they had been out there until an entire generation of them had died off. So again, it's fair to say that they'd seen their highs and lows. In chapter 5, just prior to what we read, scan my audience, all the children went to children's church. Just prior to what we read, they had reestablished their covenant with God. God had came to Joshua and said, "We're about to go. We're going to take this city, and I want to reestablish this covenant I made with Abraham, that I made with my people before you wound up in the wilderness." Because in their time in the wilderness, they were just surviving. Just surviving. Probably a season that somebody in this room can relate to, a time when you're just surviving. And so they had fallen away from some traditions and some practices, and God says we need to reestablish that covenant. So just like the original covenant with Abraham, this is why I scanned the room for children's church was started, God required that all these men go through circumcision just the same way that they had when the covenant was first established with Abraham. And I say this because at this point, just imagine being these men who are like, "Okay, God, we've wandered for 40 years. We've been out here, we've watched an entire generation before us die off. Our predecessors, our ancestors are not coming with us. Okay, now you want us all to be circumcised and go through this with a stone of flint. And okay, obviously after this, we're good, right? Obviously that's what you're going to ask of us. Then you're going to give us this land. We're going to go straight into the promised land and the good and everything that's to come. Obviously there's not going to be more, right? But there was. They showed up to the first city of their new home, and they realized that it was protected by an army. It was protected by massive walls and things that they didn't feel like they were personally equipped to take on. Again, these weren't trained military. These were Israelites who had just been wandering and surviving. These were Israelites who thought in their own mind, on their own standard, that they had paid their dues and that they were going to reap and receive what was theirs, what was rightfully theirs. Even though that wasn't exactly the case, they didn't just come in and say, this is what we're willing to pay, now God, give us what's ours. God did tell Joshua that you're going to take this city. This will be the first step in your home. This will be the first step in fulfilling the promise that I made to you. Your people will possess this land. And we read the entire scripture right at the very end of the story. It says that those walls fell, the walls that they thought were so large they could never get past, the army that they thought was well-trained and well-provisioned that they wouldn't be able to defeat, those walls and that army came down, and God did provide. God delivered. And we learn a few things about God's provision. We learn a few things about God through that process. Because again, it's easy to relate to the Israelites there. In a season in your life, maybe you've been to the point where you're saying, God, I'm praying for this. I'm praying for financial security. I'm praying for, a healthy, God-centered marriage and relationship. I'm praying for success in my work. I'm praying that my kids come to know the Lord. The prayer requests around this room could be numerous. I don't know them all. And maybe you've prayed and you said, God, I did this. I was faithful to the first thing you called me to do, and I was faithful to the next thing you called me to do. And God, I've remained faithful, but right now I'm getting a little weary. God, I'm getting a little tired. I am sure that the very next thing is that you're just going to give me what I've been asking for, and you're going to give me what I'm praying for. But it doesn't always come in that time. And sometimes we don't understand why. God, we've wanted, we've prayed, we've been faithful, but why not? And that's where we learn three things in this that I think all of us need to apply to our lives when we're in those moments. The first thing is God's plan doesn't always make sense to us. Sometimes there's purpose in the process. Sometimes what God is calling us through is to prepare us for what he has for us to do. There's purpose in the process. The Israelites know that they have to take Jericho, but they remember, they know they have to take Jericho, and they're looking at this, and when they say, in the beginning, they see Jericho and they think, okay, we're not personally prepared to rip these walls down. We don't have a military that can take care of their garrison that is fed and trained and prepared. But we remember when he led us out of Egypt and when he parted the seas. This is where their faith does come into play. We remember that he parted the seas and we crossed on dry land, and then he brought the seas together and wiped out those armies. God can do that. He can knock this city down for us. That's what's going to happen. As soon as we get over there, God's just going to knock this city down. But that's not what happened. When they got there, God said, well, actually, I still have something I want to ask of you. And you're going to march for 7 days. These are the same Israelites that saw, or they're the descendants of those that saw God deliver their ancestors out of Egypt and to bring these plagues, which there was a whole amazing study I read about these plagues this week that we should discuss at some point. But he saw him bring Pharaoh, the most powerful ruler of the known world at the time, to his knees and beg the slaves to leave at one point because he had been so defeated by the might of their God, and he was so in awe of him. He said, fine, go. You've defeated all the known powerful people. Just get out of here and go. So the same God that did that, they were putting their faith in him. He can just knock these walls down at will. So in those moments, it's easy to say, if that's the God we know, that's the God we've seen and what we've seen him do, why isn't he just doing? Why, when I pray for this, does he not just grant me wishes? Why is God not like my genie when I just say, God, here's your son, you're a good and faithful servant. I show up to church almost every week, and I throw my money in the tithing when it gets passed around, and I volunteer when I'm asked to. God, I do these things, so wish number one is, can you just handle that for me? And sometimes we get frustrated when we realize that God still has a process. But again, remember, there's purpose in the process. The Israelites, again, they know he can do the same things here. So they had to have asked themselves, why do we have to march for 7 days? Again, I'm telling you that there's purpose in the process, but I'm not claiming to know all of the mysteries of God. I'll never claim to know all the mysteries of an all-knowing God. I'm not an all-knowing pastor. I'm a country boy from Hamilton County, so I can't even begin to get there. But I do know that God has a plan and a purpose. They were asking God, how can we speed this up a little bit? But what we don't see here is that in 7 days of walking and being faithful in the steps that God called them to, they were prepared. God was preparing them for what was to come. God knew what was coming. He knew that taking Jericho was just the first step. And he knew, just like often we do with our kids, hey, I can give you what you're asking for, but I need to prepare you to be able to take care of yourself. I need to be able to prepare you for when the world pushes back. If we just hand it to you now, we give you the world on a silver platter, you're not going to be prepared for when things get rough. So again, there was purpose in this process. God knew what was coming. He knew that taking Jericho was just the first step, and God knew that if they could put their faith in him and learn to trust him when they didn't understand the plan, that their relationship would be ready for whatever was going to come next. He said, trust me in this, and then you'll know when the next thing pushes back, when the world pushes against, that I still have your back. God was preparing them and teaching them to trust in him fully. Is it possible that in our own lives, that God sometimes eases up on the gas pedal for our own good? We are really quick to say, God, I want it, and I want it now. God, I'm wasting time. If you could just give me the financial security that I'm praying for, I'd be able to bless my kids in ways that I wasn't blessed, or I'd be able to provide a future for them so they don't have to stress the way that I want to stress, that I had to stress. And God is saying, no, maybe there's a lesson in this. Remember, there's a purpose in my process. God's saying, sometimes I know you're asking for a bigger influence. I know you're asking for more responsibility at work. Maybe he says there's somebody here this year, I know you're praying for a family. And God's saying, hey, before I give you more down there, before I give you more influence, before I give you more power, before I give you more authority, maybe first we need to make sure stuff between us is good. Maybe in your own life, God is challenging you. He's saying, hey, I know you want more, and I want to bless you beyond what you're even praying for. But let's make sure that we're good so that as you step out there, you're prepared again for what the world has to throw at you. And so maybe it's not in our time because he knows we still need a little bit of focus, a little bit of connection with him. The list goes on, but remember, there is always a purpose in the process. The second thing I want us to learn about God is God's plan is not always on our timeline. And this sounds very similar, but the first one being about the process, the second one being about expediency. Again, the Israelites knew at this point that God could take the city at will. He could snap his fingers and the walls would fall. He could just take the breath out of the lungs of every one of those soldiers that were holding the walls, but he was choosing not to. And what I see when I read the Bible is that people really haven't changed that much from then until now. We want what we want, and we want it now, but we need to have the faith that God knows more than we do. He knows just exactly when things need to happen. Again, talking about God's preparation, I've shared a little bit of my testimony throughout meeting with your deacons and being up here on the Sunday mornings that I have. But I was born into a family that was not a church-going family, and my mother battled with addiction, and my father was in prison, and I had very great grandparents that stepped in and loved me my entire life. But from a young age, I looked at family, and I looked at friends and their families, and I thought, why doesn't mine look like theirs? And so I was a young boy when I started to pray that, God, I want you to make me into a husband and a father, and I want to do better than what he did. I knew at a young age that God was calling me to that, and he was telling me, look at these men that I'm putting in your life as an example, because one day that's who I'm going to call you. That's the position that I'm going to put you in. I started to picture the family that God had in store for me, and when I graduated high school, I was dating a girl, just like every teenage boy. I thought, oh, this is the one, this is the plan. And I thought, I'm going to be married in the next few years and we're going to start a family. And this was the life that I pictured for myself. And then that didn't happen. And the next thing I know, I'm looking up and I'm in my 20s and I'm seeing my 20s go by year after year. And pretty soon my 20s are in my rear view. And I'm pursuing after God at this point. I'm working in youth ministry and life is good. But again, I knew that God, in my heart, I knew that God was calling me to be a husband and a father. But now I'm 30 and I'm still hanging out in my bachelor pad and playing PlayStation and doing all these things. I'm a little bit embarrassed to tell you that I was doing at 30 years old. But I never quit praying that God would, that God was preparing me for that. Next thing I know, I'm 31. I meet Rachel at Mimo's for pizza. It was her idea. I'm more romantic than that. Pizza at Mimo's was her idea. 6 months later, we were engaged. 6 months later, we were married. Not planned. It was the only available weekend, so it's really easy for me to remember our first date and exactly 1 year later, married on the same day, so that worked out for me. Now we're looking back almost 3 years and we're here. We're here exactly where for years I've been praying in different facets. God, I'm praying that you would make me into a husband and a father that's glorifying to you. God, I'm praying that you can use me in a ministry that's glorifying to you. And I can look back over that story and all the work that God was doing in my life and all the prayers that I sent up. And I can see now that God was telling me, Jeff, just be patient. It's my time, it's not yours. I can tell that there was a purpose in the process and so many things that I went through and that I learned and that I saw and that I observed and people that spoke into my life prepared me for the positions that I get to be in now. He prepared me in more ways than I have time to even explain right now how to exactly be the man that my family needs. I can imagine being the Israelites, and at this point you would think that they would have learned their lesson, just trust God. There were multiple times in their time in the wilderness that they failed and had to be recorrected, and the whole point was, hey, just trust me. I've got a plan. Keep your eyes on me. Let my plan be your guide, and everything's going to be okay. And they kept having to be corrected. So you would think at this point that they would have learned that lesson, just trust God. He got you out of Egypt. He got you out of the wilderness. God's timing has always been better than your own. But however, just like when they're about to march around these walls of Jericho, just like in our life when I was praying to be a father, or maybe across this room, whatever you're praying for, it feels a little hectic when it's not on your timeline. We naturally want to be in control of that. We are planners by nature. God, I'll graduate high school, and then I'll go to college, and then I'll get that job that I want, and from there I'll move up the ranks. In the process, I'll meet the one that I'm supposed to marry, and I'll be making this much money, and then I'm going to build a house here, and I'm going to do these things. Across this room, so many people have probably had some form of that plan laid out for themselves. And most of us can testify that it didn't work out exactly that way. And when it didn't, you have that moment of panic. But God, all the first few steps were exactly how we prayed about it, exactly how we talked about it. And God said, you prayed, but let me do the planning. Matthew chapter 6, verse 34 says, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. In 1 Peter, the Bible also tells us to cast our worries on God. This is not a challenge or a test. It's not a way of proving ourselves. He's not saying, show me that you're worthy by just acting tough or forgetting about things. God is giving us a remedy. He's given us a cure. So many times in life, anxiousness about why our plans aren't being fulfilled will cause us to turn back, to try to correct our own timeline. And God's saying, no, you're wasting time. Just stay on my plan and watch how things are fulfilled. This is not meant to be a challenge or a test. If you want to be a true Christian, quit worrying. It's meant for me. I'm trying to tell you that God wants to free you from those things that are holding you down. Your anxiety and your stress of what's to come, about your plan being fulfilled. It is one of the most freeing things you can do when you say, okay, God, I know what I want. I'm going to continue to pray for it. He wants you to continue to pray for it, but then he wants you to put the outcome in his hands. And when you can truly do that and you can truly let go, the plan, the process that he's putting you through will become so much more enjoyable. You'll begin to see the work that he's doing. You'll begin to appreciate the lessons that you're learning. This is a drastic step in faith that most believers still need to take. There's so many Christians who want to give their life to God. They do. God, I know that you're the creator of all. I know you're the one and only God. I know that you sent your son to die for my sins. And I know that only through accepting that blood that was paid for me can I get to heaven. They believe that, but then they still want to hold on to their plans. Maybe because they feel it's not worthy enough or big enough for God. But I'm telling you, the God we serve, the God we worship is so big. The Bible says he knows every hair on your head. He is concerned about every one of your concerns, every one of your anxieties, every one of your burdens. He's big enough to take them. So don't feel like it's your responsibility. Don't feel like it's going to get out of control. Because again, there's also that fear of, but if I give somebody else my timeline, what if their plan's different than my plan? Good. His plan is better than your plan. So cast it off on him. The third thing I want to discuss about God today is that his plan is always good. I said cast it off on him because his plan is always better. His plan is always good. Sometimes our plan is selfish. Sometimes our plan is self-seeking. Sometimes our plan doesn't take into account how am I going to use this to reach the lost. Sometimes our plan is material and worldly and has nothing to do with eternity. And God's saying, hey, you're focusing on small things. I'm trying to share the kingdom with you. His plan is always good. Taking Jericho was not easy as easy as the Israelites thought it should be. It didn't happen as soon as they thought it should happen. And yet it was still a victory and a deliverance beyond what they were expecting. The payoff on day 7 when the horns blared and the people yelled would have been, I can't imagine anything in my lifetime that would be equivalent. I have written down here, it would have been something to see, and I wanted to compare it. It would be, well, for me, it was like the 2016 World Series and the Cubs win in Game 7. Greater than that. Nothing I can think of in the world would compare to what it would have looked like to be the Israelites who have but this is their timeline, delivered from slavery, led to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, all in the hope and the promise of what was to come. And now they're on the banks of that hope and that promise of what's going to come. And God says, slow down. There's one more thing. And then to finally see those walls come down, I can only imagine the joy and the fulfillment that happened. The power of God was on full display, and I'm sure any doubts amongst the people were gone. Just like in my own life when I shared about my journey getting to become Rachel's husband and Etta and Judah's father, I'm sure they were able to look back and just see how good God was through every bit of it. And that's the sad thing, is that we miss out on that joy. When it takes too long for us to let go, that's one of my hopes as somebody who gets to preach and share the Gospels. If I can encourage anybody to let go sooner than I did, learn from my mistakes, give it to God today. Don't let another day pass by where you're carrying your own burdens and anxieties, where you're carrying your own doubts and fears, or your own worry about tomorrow is on you because you haven't even accepted him as your Lord and Savior for eternity. My hope is every day that I encourage people to not waste another day without leaning on him. I hope they can look back and see the joy. That's another thing. We're wasting time every day. We can see the joy of God preparing us when we realize that there's always a purpose in his process. So for a moment, let's put ourselves in the shoes of the Israelites. On the first day, Joshua brings them together, God's speaking to Joshua, and so Joshua's speaking to the people, and he says, all right, we're going to get in formation. This is what it's going to look like. This is where I want the ark. This is where I want the priest. You guys are going to have horns. Here are your marching orders. Okay, ready, go. I did a little bit of research, and from what archaeological finds can tell us today is that the march around the city of Jericho would have been about 1.5 miles, 1.5 miles. And it's not 1.5 miles around a high school track. It was a rocky, mountainous city, so it would have been rough terrain, not the easiest thing. Again, these weren't conditioned athletes or soldiers. These were everyday people. Yes, they had lived some tough times, but this was a daunting task that Joshua was telling them. You got to imagine that feeling of they're coming to the city. Again, we just said this. They're coming to the city, and they're like, right there, God, the God who split the sea, he's going to wipe those walls out of our way, and we're going to walk right in. And God says, no, actually, I want you to stand up here, and I want you to march every day 1.5 miles around this rocky terrain, carrying these supplies and doing these things, and then go back and do nothing. That's the hardest part for me sometimes, is when I pray to God, God, I want to see this movement. God, I want to see this happen. And he says, okay, be faithful to what I've called you to do, and then sit and wait. Let me do what I have to do. As a pastor, I pray over, God, what do you want me? For years, I've been praying, God, what do you want me to share with these students? Every opportunity I've had to speak at a camp or a conference or another church, God, what do you want me to share with this group? And I tried, and I can honestly say that I'm faithful to whatever God's put on my heart in those moments. But then oftentimes I have to leave and say, all right, now, God, it's you. Now I'm waiting for the Spirit to work in these lives, and I don't necessarily get to see the fruit of what just happened. And that's what the Israelites were dealing with here. They're saying, okay, God, we're going to do what you called us to do, and then we're going to go back and just have faith that you're working in this. Again, it wasn't easy terrain, and even with that said, on day one, I'm sure that they were fueled by faith. Maybe as a church, there's been times where you said, okay, as a church, we're going to come together and we're going to pray. Maybe it was an uncertain time when we found out that as a church that Jeremy was going to leave. And there were people in the church that said, okay, what's next? What is God's plan? And from getting to know you in the time I have no doubt that this church said, let's pray. Let's seek God's guidance. And in the beginning, you're fueled by faith because time and time again in your own life, you've seen God move and you've seen him provide. And so maybe in those first few days, it's easy. God's going to provide. Everything's going to be okay. But then the Israelites came to day 2 and 3. Maybe you start to see that wane a little bit. Okay, God, we're praying. Whereas the Israelites, okay, God, we're now 4.5 miles into this. 4.5 miles into this walking and carrying and looking silly and looking foolish. But God, if you've called us to it, we're going to do it. But maybe at those days 3 and 4, they were sitting down there saying, we're still doing it, but our feet hurt. And our backs hurt. And we're starting to wonder, really, what is he going to do on day 7? If he could just knock the walls down, wouldn't he already have done it? What if day 7 is actually going to be bad news? What if it's going to be the news that we don't want? Day 4 and 5, I'm sure their bodies were tired, their minds were weary, the doubts had creeped in. Again, they were starting to question what they were going through and why they were going through it. Was it even going to be worth it? Uncertainty was creeping in. They were asking if day 7 was ever even going to get there. Day 6, going into day 7, I could picture the Israelites dragging their feet as they got into that final formation. Because they're looking at the day ahead of him. He said, now it's day 7. You're going to do this 7 times. 7 times you're going to take this 1.5 mile hike around this rocky terrain and then watch the walls fall. And in their mind, again, they've gone through a season of being faithful, but not seeing the fruit of it. And it's only human nature. I can understand that the doubts had begun to take over. I bet that even though they wouldn't admit it to the people sitting beside them, that maybe some of them were even beginning to give up. Some of them were saying, okay, this is supposed to be the day, and if it doesn't happen, this is my last day. I'm turning around and going back. At least in the wilderness, there was manna, and At least in the wilderness, there wasn't an army watching us do these things, and at least there we had options. And again, I bet there's a season in your life that you can relate to that feeling. I can remember seasons where I had to look at myself in the mirror every single day and say, you can do this. There were days I had to look in the mirror and tell myself that God has a plan for you. When God was shaping me in my life, there were times when I prayed for it to just be over. That God, if you're really going to use me, just do it already. Because this whole molding and sharpening, it's getting hard. And rejection hurts, and failure hurts, and uncertainty is hard. And I was praying, God, just do it already. I thought I was ready. I thought I was ready for my plan to be fulfilled. And I didn't understand what God was waiting on. Sometimes I felt God must have just forgot, or I'm so small that this isn't important in the big scheme of things. Our church is so small, God must have better things to do than to worry about us. I want to say that I'm so very thankful. It was my first Sunday here at Bell Rive. I'm so very thankful that I waited for day 7. That what I prayed for, and in the times when it was hard, and the times when I was uncertain, and I said, God, can you really use me? When I was in seminary and I was way outclassed by intellectuals and theologians and people that came from Christian families that had raised them in the Word. And I thought, God, this is hard and it's embarrassing. And in the years of serving faithfully, when there was pushback from the places that I was serving, and I said, God, I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing, but God, this doesn't look how I want it to look. And now I get to look back and I get to say, I'm so thankful for all the lessons that I learned. I'm thankful for all the people that I met. I'm thankful for the mentors that got me here. I'm thankful for the people that I even looked at and said, maybe I don't want to do it that way. I'm thankful that I made it through day 7. I'm thankful that I was faithful in day 7, but I'm never going to lie to you. And I'm just talking about this process. There's numerous times in my life where I was waiting for a day 7. And there's numerous times in my life where I've said, God, I don't know if I want to keep going. I'm almost done. I want to close today with this thought. Where are you at right now in the journey that God's put you on? Are you still on day 0 and you're battling doubt of whether or not you should even get started? Are you somewhere between days 1 and 6 and you're digging deep to be faithful and to trust that God is going to work out things for his good? Are you trying to convince yourself every day to just keep going? If you are, then I want to pray with you and I want to pray for you. I'm praying for you now, but I want to know. I want to pray with you personally. I remember being there on days 4 and 6, and I want to assure you that you can persevere to the end. You can persevere, and also that you don't have to do it alone. But as long as I'm here, and I feel that this is the way you've always been here, and that's why I wanted to come and partner with you, that this is a church that will pray for you. This is a church that will encourage you. This is a church that will do life with you. And when you're in days 4 through 6, don't be afraid to tell the people beside you. And we're gonna march around those walls with you. The last question I have for you is, are you ready for day 7? Day 7 is coming. If you're day 6 right now and you're saying, I've given it so much for so long, can I go for that day 7, which is going to be the hardest day for the Israelites marching around Jericho. It was the biggest, toughest day, but it was worth it. In the end, they saw full fulfillment of God's promise with the city of Jericho. So day 7 is coming. It's coming in your lives. It's coming in my life. It's coming here at Bell Rive Missionary Baptist Church. And I believe around this room that we could share stories about uncertainty, but still faithfulness. Faithfulness in God's plan over your life, faithfulness in God's plan over your marriage, over your family, faithfulness in God's plan over the last couple of years of this church. I've prayed for a church in my life that would partner with me as we share a vision to reach lost souls in Southern Illinois. And you prayed for a pastor. God's provided both. Kim, if you want to go ahead and come up. In your own life right now, have faith that God's plan is being fulfilled. Somebody in this room is praying for healing. Some of you are praying for relief, for guidance, for rest, for reconciliation. That list goes on and on. And no matter where you think you may be on that journey, whether you're starting at day 0, just trying to get yourself to take the first step, whether you're in days 1 through 6 and you're feeling the wear and tear, you're feeling the weariness, I want you to start now thanking God for day 7. Because we have a God who has always delivered day 7. Time and time again, example through example, God has always got us to and through day 7. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 9 tells us that God is faithful. He always has been, he always will be, and he won't stop now. That's the God we're praying to today. So if you have anything to lift up to the Lord, whether it's thanks, whether it's requests, whether you're asking him to intervene in your life, we're going to have an opportunity to respond now as they begin to play. And again, whatever day that you feel you're on, know that day 7 is coming and know that you don't have to face it alone. I want to pray with you. Your deacons want to pray with you. Your brothers and sisters in this room want to pray with you. And I don't want you to miss this opportunity to leave those burdens here and go out there ready for what God has for you next. So the altars are open.